mic on. Hi everybody, and welcome to Building with Richard. Today I am going to put together my structure 420. I set up down here in my basement, so I had to flip the case from standing vertically to laying down flat. Because of that, I had to take all my modules out. So today I'm going to put them in, and I figured, well, if I'm going to sit here putting a system together, I might as well turn on the stream and see what people think. Hopefully you can see me okay. Hopefully you can hear me. We're listening to Sean Holt, which is what I usually listen to when I do these Building with Richard streams, because Sean is a great guy. His music is beautiful, and I don't get any copyright strikes. And Sean doesn't seem to mind. Hopefully, if you guys like what you hear, you go to his Bandcamp page and buy a record or two. It's really, really nice stuff. So that's what we got. Like I said, I set up downstairs, so I have sort of a proper studio to do this in now. As you can see, I have a set, I guess, behind me, a shelf with some fun things on it. And I'm broadcasting in 4K now, which is cool. So hopefully everything's going to look nice and clear and crisp. You should get a nice, cleaner view of the modular as I put it together, and then in new streams when I'm doing patch labs and whatnot, it should be nice and clear so you can actually see what I'm doing now, which I think would be cool. So without further delay, as I kind of go through this, let's just flip around here, and I'll show you what I have. So this is the case we're working on here today. It's the same structure 420 that I've used in all of my streams, except the difference is now it's laying down instead of standing up. So I already took out all the modules, and it's ready to go. Hopefully if I power it on here, yep, it powers on. But we're going to power that off as we build it up. So we have the case here. We've got some screws, and let's see what we got. I got another angle here. There we go. All right. So normally when I do this, I start kind of in the upper left-hand corner and kind of work my way down. And I try to, when I build these things, I tried originally for a long time, I would sort of go with the idea that the workflow is left to right. But what I've found is the workflow, you know, your oscillators here all the way to your output here, but everything kind of ends up everywhere anyway. So I'm not really sure how I'm going to set this up. I don't want to quite use the same exact system that I had in here when I took it out. So I guess let's just pop a few modules in and sort of see where it takes us. If we start with the SV1B here, I kind of put that in the middle. That's where it was in the old setup, but I think it works nicely there. I'm going to turn the music down just a touch. Yes, Ed, we do use separate power supplies in these larger cases for plus and minus and 5. And it just gives us all the power in the world, so we don't have to worry about it. Plenty of power. Voltage lab. Typically on the bottom row I'll put my controllers, like sequencers and performance modules. So something like the percussion sequencer, which I use all the time. I like to have it where I can touch it without kind of digging through all the spaghetti. There we go. I also have the Lifeforms touch controller here. Wish I had a little cloth or something. There we go. Dust them off. I also, because this system is the system I use for live streaming, I kind of have to take into account glare from the lights, which for these modules isn't too bad, but for a module like this, depending on how the light hits it, because it's just like a plexiglass panel, it can get annoying fast. So it looks better at the top row. I have a lot of these plexiglass panels right now. The channel driver, another 2 modules, these are plexiglass. You can see we've got oh, it's going to go out of focus. We've got a couple mods on these because these were just prototypes. I'd actually wired the low sweep pot backwards. Here's another example of a couple mods, and these I'm going to zoom in so you can see. But this is the Local Florist, and this module actually is in production now. We're not using these panels. The panels that I ultimately went with, I think, look even way better than these. I couldn't get this striped effect on the final printing. This is actually just my printer lost its mind and decided to get everything in texture, which for this worked out fine, but you know, you can't do that in a production run. So the production modules, I changed up the panel a bit, and I think they look really nice. But here is the production prototype. This one's nice and clean. There's no problems with it. But here is the pre-production prototype, and you can see at one point we decided we needed another op amp on there for a buffer. So you can see we added an op amp, and there was nowhere to sort of mod it on, so it's just sort of floating there. It's just kind of fun. I have a lot of modules like this because I tend to collect the prototypes, and they end up being the modules that make it to my house. So I got a ton of modules with op amps or various things kind of hanging off the bottom. I get a kick out of that. Like I said, the Local Florist is in production now, and we will be, they should be 6 weeks, 2 months, I don't know. Who knows how long stuff takes now with COVID and everything. I feel like our modules keep getting larger in size. There's another cascading delay network. There's still a few of those left. If you're interested, there's not many of them left. But the feedback I've got from the people that have purchased it really, really like it. And I'm a big fan myself. I actually have 2 of them. I only have one here, but I have another one at my system at the shop. Double Helix. Double Helix, I've sort of forever put it in the upper left-hand corner. I think that's where that's going to live. It's just such a utility oscillator that I feel like that's a good spot for it. Microsequence 2 of these. Maybe I'll break them up. Here's a couple more oscillators. These guys are covered in red tape, but still very cool oscillators. They sound amazing. Big ridiculous sound out of these guys. Oh, nice. I'm glad you guys enjoy the module. Here's a couple of these modules that I've called Smash. These are also already in production. These we're doing, I think we did 200 of these. Although the production run, they're not called Smash. And I didn't use these panels. I may have told the story already, but I had this idea, oh, we could do these small 4 HP modules and we could do it very quickly by using PCB panels. And I figured, well, there's some other manufacturers out there that use PCB panels and they're not bad. So I thought, well, for these particular ones, which the idea was just to get them out kind of quickly as we work on some larger stuff that obviously is taking longer than I initially thought it would. This would be a nice way to sort of fill the gap with some really interesting ideas that we'd been playing around with at the workshop. So I had these made, and these are hand-built prototypes. These were built by Ross at our shop. And I got the panels. I put a ruler on the side in centimeters because I'm always looking for a ruler, and I figured, well, most prototype panels, I end up using them for a couple weeks, and then you get the real panels in, and these just, they end up going in a box and you never see them again. But I thought, well, if they have a ruler on them, I'm always looking for a ruler. So that was the idea with these, is that even once I stop using them as panels, now they're just rulers, and they'll still be useful. And I checked them against an actual nicer ruler, a real ruler, and the lines are right where they need to be, so I can use it, which is kind of fun. But so yeah, the production version of these, I can't remember what the name is, but we changed it from Smash. We completely changed the graphics. It's now going to be on aluminum panels with black panel with, I think this one has black printing. But you'll see, they're kind of fun. And they sound really, really good. I showcased those in the last live stream, and I'm sure I'm going to do it again in the next one because I think they really, really sound good. And at 4 HP, there's an unbelievable amount of power there. Oh, I had 3 of those. Here's another one. So these are the mixers. These are another one, the same idea as those, you know, PCB panels, get them sort of out quickly. This is a circuit that we've had laying around forever that we've just sort of never utilized outside of larger instruments. And I thought, well, this will make a great little filler module. You could put it anywhere, and it's super high utility in 4 HP. Again, hated the panels when I got them. Not going to do the panels like this. This one, what is the name of this one? I can't remember the name of this one either. It's not mixer. This one is, again, going to be black aluminum panel with either red printing or green printing, blue printing. But super utility. It's 4 attenuators that can be 2 separate mixer, or attenuverters that can be 2 separate mixers, or 1 big mixer. Tons of utility in that. That doesn't help me put them anywhere right now, though. We'll stick one here. Maybe stick one by the oscillators for some mixing. I feel like these channel drivers should be over here by the mixing console, so I can use them, like patch the sound into the channel driver into the final mixer. I always patch. I use the aux loop and the mixing console. I always end up using my Alesis MIDI Verb 2 with as the reverb. So I don't necessarily need like a delay or something for the aux loop nearby to sort of make sense in my head, because that's the MIDI verb is in my rack. Is the Smash going to make its way into a larger module? Yes. Yes. It is. Into a full system, full synthesizer. Yeah. Yeah. Low pass gate. This is my sort of ubiquitous kick drum. I think I'm going to stick a Smash next to that, because I love to come out of the low pass gate and then roll off some of the high for a kick drum, and a low pass filter is perfect for that. But because the Smash has all that drive, I can get a big overdriven kick with it too if I want. So I think that's where I'm going to go. This is the binary filter I normally use with the low pass gate, but so this guy can live somewhere else. I'll stick it in the middle. This thing fills up so fast. An ADSR and a mod tools here. The mod tools, the function generator, I typically end up using for hi-hat envelopes, because it has the voltage control over the rise and the fall, so I can get variances in that. And you always need ADSRs, so. Throw a distro in here. The distro, I like to keep in the top row before, because when I would jam with Herman, he would send me a clock from way across my backyard, and it would loop over the top of the case and plug it in so it was out of the way, and then I could sort of patch around with it. But now we're not doing that anymore, so I can stick it anywhere I want. Some more filters here. I feel like my case is going to be a little filter heavy. So we'll stick this ADSR down here because it fits. Oh no, you know what? Slide this over. We'll put the analog delay unit here right next to the mixing console. Put these ADSRs next to the dynamics controller module. Sort of old LFO2. I can go there. I think that might be it for that album. Hello, Synth Anatomy. Yeah, so the last module of that is the dynamic impulse filter. That can probably live, well, there's only one spot for it here. So let's move this stuff around a little bit. The local florists, I think these guys need to live, well, the lighting doesn't seem to be too bad on them up there. these are clearly effects modules. That's low pass gates, filters. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of sense being made by this layout. And these are the exact same modules that I had in here before. Nothing's really changed. I do have another 4 HP module that I'll be adding to my case this week. A third one that's based off some circuitry in the microvolt and the voltage lab for some randomization. But I don't have it yet. But I suspect one of these smashes is sort of a stand-in for that. And I also don't have, other than in the SV1B, there's no real VCAs. Although I guess we have the VCAs in here, but I don't really have VCAs in my setup. Is that okay? I don't know. Honestly, I don't use VCAs that much. I typically use our dynamics controllers now as the VCAs. You know, they have a VCA function, they just do quite a bit more. So like a standalone dual VCA module, I don't end up using them as much, although I would like to have one so that I could modulate modulation, because as awesome as the dynamics controllers are in here and in the voltage lab, they don't pass CV. So because of that, I feel like there should be some VCAs in here. And maybe I take out the dynamic impulse filter, because this case is so filter heavy with binary filter, 3 smashes, binary filter in the SV1B, plus all the filtering you can do with the dynamics controllers in filter mode. I feel like that's probably more filters than I really need. So the dynamic impulse filter, I think, is out the door. We can stick a dual VCA. This one is, I don't know if you can see that, it's Prototype E from years and years ago. This was one of the prototypes we built for this Lifeforms line right before NAMM. Oh boy, 4 or 5 years ago. This was another one built by Ross back when we used to use green PCBs. Alright, I think that's a good setup. I feel like these should be closer to the ADSRs because that's typically where I use them. And these local florists could probably live. I would really like them where the cascading delay network is. So maybe what we do is we put these guys here. Stick this in the corner. So that mostly affects over here. Some controllers. Kick drum out of the way. Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm not sure how I feel about the voltage lab down here. Sure, that's fine too. I haven't had any modules in here while I was setting up the lights, so I can see there's some glare or whatnot coming from the lights. But I can fix that later. I knew that was going to be a pain in the rear. Yep, Sean's an Ohio guy. I think he's in Akron. It's been a while since I've talked to him. I haven't seen him. For a while, he would come into the shop every 4 or 5 months. Obviously, nobody's coming into the shop anymore. And he had a real tough case of, I think, COVID at the very beginning. So I hope he's doing well. Either way, feel free to support him on his Bandcamp page if you like the music. I think it's nice. All right, so I think this is a decent layout. I'm happy with this. I think it's musically, it'll be a little bit different and just shake my brain up a little bit as I'm patching it. So I think I'm going to go through and just start putting it together. I think I'll start on the bottom row and kind of work my way up. So just take some of these out of the way here. Oh, you think I'm going to get caught up in the patch cables with the voltage lab down here? I didn't think of that. But you know what? There's patch cables everywhere. I think it'll be fine. And I don't necessarily want it up here. I like the top row to be standalone bits. Yeah, I'll try it down here and see how it goes. Stick that there. Is this how you guys do this? Do you just sort of put them in and then kind of go from there? At work, I've got a case similar to this on my desk, but it only has 4 or 5 modules in it typically because it's, for testing purposes and whatnot. And I have a few modules that I keep in there, like you always need an oscillator and all that. So I have some modules that kind of live in there, but most of them aren't even screwed in. They're just sort of floating because I move stuff around so much there that it makes sense to kind of get it in and get it out. Oh, that's right, because I'm using the case this way, all of my power headers are upside down because the case is meant to stand up. I did change, because details matter, I did change the structure logo. I flipped it around so it would be the right direction on camera. Find my screwdriver. I could have just left it upside down. I guess that would have been fine, but because it's just screwed in there, it was easy to flip around. Ricky's not in the business of selling cases, where I kind of am, so I feel like it's got to look good. Any price on the florist yet? Nope, no price on the florist yet. It's going to be expensive though. Unfortunately, the panels were very expensive, and one of the chips we're using is a little expensive in it. So it's not going to be a cheap module. And that's another circuit where it is. Hey, Sean. Welcome to the Sean Holt musical experience. Yeah, so anyway, the local florist, that's another circuit where I don't know if we're going to do more standalone modules after this initial batch, but we are absolutely going to incorporate that circuit into larger projects. And this week I actually was working on an instrument that utilizes that local florist circuit in some really interesting ways. So it's one of those modules that if you get one of the standalones, great, but if you miss out on that, you're going to be able to get it in other things, because it was the initial design for it was for a larger standalone synthesizer that we've been working on. But as soon as I heard it, it just didn't work for it. It didn't give me the sound that I was looking for. So the larger instrument, we ended up using a variant of our analog delay unit in it. But like I said, over the course of this week, I did design a nice, smaller little guy that does really, it was all designed around using this as the showpiece of it. So down the road, you will be able to get one either way. Thanks again to Sean for letting me use his music in the background of these. If anybody else watching has a Bandcamp page and they want, they don't mind me using their music as background for my live Building with Richard live streams, you can send me an email, richard@pittsburghmodular.com, with a link. It's that easy. And if I like it and I want to listen to it while I build, I will put it on the streams. Some people have sent me like SoundCloud pages and whatnot in the past, but for my purposes, Bandcamp seems to be the easiest for my sort of live streaming setup here. I don't want to have to bounce around too much. Are those temporary knobs on the new oscillator? That's a good question. It's a good question. I'm not going to answer that question. Sean, I hope you're recovering. Your recovery's coming along well, and you're feeling a bit better. Oh, good to hear. Good to hear. After I get a row assembled, I'd like to power it up and check to see that I'm not burning anything or anything bad has happened, so it seems to be okay. good news. Yeah, I know we talked about mountain biking last year, and that obviously didn't work out. I've been out on the bike quite a bit this summer because there's not a whole lot else you could do. So me and Danielle did a ton of biking this summer. Really one of the few joys sort of over the last 8 months or so. Once I get all the modules in and sort of lined up, tighten them down, and we're good to go. The first row. Of course, the first row is all large modules, so it didn't take very long. We'll see how long the upper rows take. I try not to do this too often, strip out all the modules and kind of start over because, it takes forever. And I feel like it's just kind of, this is time I could be using the gear and not sort of assembling it. So it's a bit frustrating. I know a lot of people, part of the fun of eurorack is sort of moving things around and being inspired in different ways by your setup. But as someone who, kind of builds this stuff for a living and designs it for a living and deals with this stuff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, when it's time to play and actually just enjoy it, I just want it to be set up, and I just want to turn it on, and I just want to go. So this is kind of frustrating, but it's part of the process. I think what I'll end up doing today is, once I get all this built, that'll sort of be the stream, and then this evening I'll probably come back and do another live stream where I actually patch something up. So that'll be kind of fun. I'll get to use it. I'll feel like I accomplished something today. Why do we use slide nuts? Why? Why? I like them. I like that you can get the modules right up next to each other. I know when you're doing this, they can be a little bit of a pain in the ass and take longer, but in the Wild West early days of eurorack, companies tended to be a little more loose with panel width standards. So sliding nuts were a way to keep your case neat and tidy without gaps when you had a module that was a bit off. That doesn't really happen anymore, but that was the sort of inspiration and why we started doing this. Will we keep doing this forever? No. Eventually we'll switch, but I don't know when. And I don't know how that'll happen. It also, for us, helps keep the cost down. You can't buy strips this wide, so what we would have to do, and the strips aren't cheap, so what we would have to do is buy the strip and then buy a full second strip and cut it and throw away the waste, basically, so that the cost would be significantly higher on the cases, which has a lot to do with it. People already don't like to spend a ton of money on cases because they, they want to spend their money on modules, which again I totally understand. But our cases are expensive to build, and that was a way that we can help keep the prices down a bit. And like I said, I like them. I like the flexibility that they offer. I'm not one of the, and I mentioned this, I'm not one of the kind of people who likes to sort of tweak the case all day long. I like to set something up and then just leave it like that. So for me, I think it's a perfectly usable system. And again, I've been doing this for so long, I don't even really think about it. It's just part of my workflow. All the little tricks of dealing with sliding nuts. Like sort of putting in the screw, backing it back just a little bit so you can still move it around as you get all four in there. Sliding it, not tightening down the row until you have all of them and you can sort of line it up. And you saw me do it with the bottom row here to get this last screw in on the voltage lab, which is the case bump, where if the nut's a little askew of the hole, you just kind of give the case a bump and it'll shimmy that nut over. So it's, I don't know, the workarounds, I get a kick out of them. This upside down power strips are playing with my brain. Yeah, I kind of moved the trigger sequencer on purpose because I think maybe if I put it in a different spot, I'll use it differently. I don't know. I moved a bunch of stuff around with the idea that maybe it'll inspire me in a slightly different way. And like I said before, I think that's why a lot of people like eurorack, because you can, if you want to, I don't do this very often, but you can just sort of infinitely tinker with your layout, your setup. And if you're like me, you have a box of modules that don't fit in your case, you can every now and then just swap out a couple modules and see where it takes you. I've been working on the studio down here the last couple days, and this synth behind me here is my mostly live wire synth. There's a couple vintage Pittsburghs in the bottom right hand side here, but for the most part it's all live wire stuff. And because this case was kind of empty sitting on the desk, I wanted something to play around with, so I've been using that system, and it's been super fun because although there's a few modules in there that I use relatively frequently, I'll take them out of there and put them in here and use them like one module with my stuff. That forced me to just use the Livewire stuff, and it was a lot of fun. it's you know, you end up working totally differently, and it ends up sounding really different. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. I think anytime you can throw your brain off a little bit for music is a good thing. I have, going forward, I have two philosophies on normaled and unnormaled, because we really are focusing on synthesizers at this point on the design level, and I've given this a lot of thought, and what I've come up with is that if we're working on something that's more East Coast based, we're absolutely going to normal it in a way that makes sense for East Coast synthesis. But it'll be done in the SV1 kind of way where you do have full access to everything and you can override the normaling. But if the instrument is more West Coast experimental, then we're not going to normalize anything, and well, that's not true. We're not going to normalize too much. An example of where we would normalize in the West Coast stuff, the music's losing its mind behind me, where we would use normaling in the West Coast would be, example, an instrument that I've been working on this past week. It has two oscillators. It's very West Coast experimental oscillator wave shaping based instrument. And so for that, I did normalize a lot of the connections between the oscillators so that the oscillators can interact in interesting ways without, in maybe ways that patch cables wouldn't really be able to do it. Because you can send one thing to 7 places at once with normaling. And I know you could do that with patch cables too, but you need malts and all that. So in situations like that, it made sense to normalize. I keep losing my module. So that would be an example of how we would do that. But I don't really have... but I think what it comes down to is a case-by-case basis. What's going to make the most sense to the artists using the instrument? What are they going to expect when they turn it on? I feel like in East Coast synth, you're going to expect it when you turn it on to be able to hook up a keyboard and play a note. I think that's a fair expectation. But if you have something that's designed to be a little bit more experimental, a little bit more thought-provoking as far as signal paths and the type of sounds that you're going to generate from it, then I don't think patching helps. And in fact, I think it kind of hinders experimentation by saying, no, this is the proper way to do it, when the reality is there is no proper way to do it. There's no correct patch. And I know you could have that argument for East Coast as well, but with the SV1, I think it's a good example. Sure, you could patch it up and do some weird stuff with it and do some sort of obtuse things, but ultimately, a lot of times, you just want a great bass line, or you just want a great lead synth. So, you have that right away. And it doesn't get in the way of overpatching it once you want to do that. So all that said, the next 3 out of the next 4 synthesizers that we have coming out all have normaling. River synthesis. That's not bad. When I did the first module, I had a little teaser page up. I hadn't even done a website yet. And I'm trying to remember the name that I used. But I had a different name for ultimately what became the Vilfo module. And although I think most people from Pittsburgh are extremely proud of their city and we're always willing to hype it as often as possible, I felt weird tying it that closely to the city when the company and the idea of Pittsburgh Modular it wasn't even really a company back then, it was just a hobby, was that young. I kind of wanted it to stand on its own merits before I dove in and started tying myself to the city. Because ultimately it just ends up becoming an inside joke because people not from Pittsburgh aren't going to understand all these random weird Pittsburghisms I would use. So it was one of those ideas that I'm like, ooh, no, doesn't work. Oh, I remember. The original name for the Vilfo was the Confluence. And that was named after the three rivers in Pittsburgh all coming together at the point near downtown. But again, I thought it was too Yinzery, too Pittsburghy. I just didn't want to do it. Hello, Bruno. Yeah, most of my streams are usually pretty late East Coast time here in the US. So I don't get a whole lot of viewers from overseas normally live because I typically do this at the end of the night after I'm done with my work and the family's gone to bed and it's sort of quiet in the house. But being a cool fall Sunday, I felt today would be a fun day to get this done. And I really just wanted to get this done so I could use it. So this is I showed this earlier, this is the local florist. This is the first prototype that we built. And you can see, let me switch to the overhead camera here. This is the original prototype for local florist. You can see if I use my keyboard as a backdrop here. At one point we decided we needed one more op amp. So sometimes when you design these things you have an extra op amp on the board and you could just sort of rewire it on the board, but this one didn't have any extra, so we had to, Perry actually modded this one. And now we have a flying op amp on the board, which is, I love these kind of mods. I think they tell such a great story and they're so interesting. It makes the modules, of course, incredibly fragile. And if you play around with them too much, they're prone to breaking. But as long as you're careful with them, they're okay. A lot of nice little mods on this. I don't know if you can see. I can't get any closer because they're out of focus. But in here, you can see the pins of the pot, and there's some resistors that we threw in there as well for the mods. And what those resistors allow us to do is tweak the feel of the pot and the response curve. So a lot of times when we build these prototypes, we're like, oh, all the action is right here, and I want the action, and I want all the interesting stuff to be a wider range. So you start playing with some resistors on the pins of the pot to change the response curve to move that sweet spot around and make it larger. Just one of the little stories the local florist prototype tells us. Again, those modules are in production now, and they should be available to the world in probably 2 months. I'll do a live stream and probably make a video for them and whatnot. I don't have a price yet. I don't even have a guess, other than they are going to be expensive. The panels we ultimately went with, we're using, I think, 3 or 4 color printing, plus it just ended up being so expensive for the panels. But I didn't want to do just a standard, can't see. I didn't want to do just a standard panel for it. I really wanted to celebrate the ridiculousness of this, and so I did do a flower drawing. It's not exactly like this, but it looks so much better. Really, really good. Here's the production prototype. This one you can see the op-amp mods are gone. The op-amp's been added to the board. What does the florist do? I've done a few live streams where I've demonstrated it pretty thoroughly, but it kind of does 3 things. It's a flanger and a chorus, flanger, chorus, flanger, chorus, florist, which is where I got florist from, because I'm not really that clever. So florist is, ultimately it's a flanger chorus module, but we were able to sort of hyper control the feedback loop through a custom feedback path. And because we have really precise control over the feedback, you can get some really, really interesting kind of spring reverb sounds out of it as well. It has some built-in modulation and stuff as well, but that's feature-wise, that's basically what it does. And it sounds really, really good. Oh no, I ran out of headers. What do I do? Gotta find a header. See? Sliding nuts. Look at this. I can move them out of the way. I can move them out of the way as I look for the lost header that I totally screwed up with. Good boy. Is there any way to mod the binary filter to be less unstable and more kick you in the face? So you want it to be more stable. I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. You could certainly increase the gain and overdrive it a bit if that's what you're talking about. You could... I'm just going by feel. I don't need a flashlight. You could, if you want more resonance in the stable mode, you could... But all these require sort of resistor value changes. There's no way to just sort of tweak it. There's no settings on it that is going to give you sort of a different flavor out of the filter. The binary filter at this point is kind of, it's so dialed in to what we want it to sound like that we've, over the years, kind of removed all of the extra bits that allowed us to shape it. We've sort of refined all of the shaping capabilities because we know what we want it to sound like, and we can do that now without having to calibrate them or tweak them. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I did ramble about it for a bit, and I should get points for that. Oh, I feel like I had a head cold and it just cleared up. Yeah, I'm such a big fan of our filter. One of the problems with being such a fan of our filter is that I never want to do anything different. I'm hesitant to experiment with filters because I'm like, well, I like the one we have. Why can't we just use that one? And ultimately, that doesn't help anybody. So I suspect in the future we will experiment with other filters. We really have, though. I like to say that Pittsburgh has one filter, and it's the filter to rule all. But we do have a second filter. It's the filter in the dynamics controller circuit. It's the filter that's in the voltage lab. It's in the dual dynamics module that'll be available here in some months down the road. So we do have another filter, and that filter I do love just as much as the filter in the binary filter. It's a different style filter, which I think is important. So the binary filter is a state variable filter, which was a topology that was popularized by Tom Oberheim and his early designs. Now, the way Tom did it and the way we did it ended up being quite a bit different. We've customized it pretty heavily with our own feedback circuits and some other bits and pieces to give it the sound that we were looking for Pittsburgh. But the basic topology, that state variable topology, has been around forever, and it's a great topology for a filter because, and I think the binary filter showcases this really nicely. You have the theoretical infinite resonance without self-oscillation. So you can get very high feedback resonance without the module sort of dipping into self-oscillation. And you also, another nice thing about the binary filter and the state variable filter topology is you don't have that low-end roll-off that you have on like a transistor ladder filter, like a Moog style filter, where as you turn up the resonance, the low end drops down. The binary filter doesn't have that at all. The state variable filter topology doesn't have that at all. So I feel like the state variable filter at 12 dB still gives you that big booming sound, but because you're holding on to that low end, because there's no change, and then you can use the levels to really sculpt the sound. Because like the binary filter, for example, we have soft clipping circuits in there that limit the output level. So what happens is if you're coming in with a big loud signal and then you add resonance to it, there's only so much room there that's left for the resonance. So you end up with a very mild resonance. But if you drop the level on the input signal to, say a standard 5 volt, because a lot of times your oscillator might start at plus minus 5 volts, but by the time it gets to a filter, if you've added a couple oscillators together or you run it through any sort of processing, through a wave folder or something, you end up with a much larger, hotter signal level, and then you run it through the filter. So if you would run it through an attenuator first, bring that level down, give that resonance some headroom, you can get quite a bit more resonance out of it, still, again, without losing any of the low end or the bulkier sound. So there's a fun tip. Now there's ways around. Obviously, with a modular, if you have like a transistor ladder filter and you don't want to lose that low end, you can obviously, but you still want that sort of that beautiful transistor ladder sound. You can always split the signal, run it through two different types of filters, and then combine it, just saving that low end for mixing it back in. Or even, something as simple as a great trick, and I do this even with ours all the time, is if you mix a sine wave in post-filter, what happens is the sine wave, if you would run it through the filter, it's really not going to affect the filter that much anyway, because, there's virtually, shouldn't be any harmonics, but realistically, there's virtually no harmonics in a sine wave. So if you mix, you send, say, a saw wave through a transistor ladder filter, or even a binary filter, when you come out of the filter, mix the sine wave back in with it. It doesn't affect the sound of the filter because it's sort of passing around it, but at the same time, it gives you more of that beefy bottom end that you want. And even if you're using a state variable filter, it just adds a little bit of heft to that bottom end and really gives you a bigger sound. So there's a trick for that. Run out of room. Yeah, I think that trick really showcases some of the benefits of eurorack, and it's one of those things that allows you to get a little creative with your patching, and that's something that a standalone instrument typically isn't going to let you do. These last two are giving me so much trouble. It's a weird angle I have. I have a tough time seeing it. Oh, I got it. Okay. Let's see if we blow anything up. Nope. Smells good. circuitous vibes. That's really interesting because I use in the voltage lab, I always patch the oscillators into the dynamics controller, and I almost exclusively use it in filter mode. Even though I'm using it as a VCA, the filter cutoff is so good in that you can use filter mode as your VCA. So that's what we tuned it for. So that's how I use it all the time. And I like it because I can add a little bit of resonance to the sound or not. And it really becomes the sound to me of what the voltage lab is. I get it. That's a good way. Yeah, I could see that. Oh, nice. Yeah, the low pass gate mode it's super, super plucky in the voltage lab, so it's perfect for that. The filter mode isn't quite as plucky, so you can't quite use it in the same way. But I tend to, for the most part, use the filter mode all the time. And actually, using the filter as the VCA is a trick that I utilize pretty strongly in an upcoming instrument. It's a little bit more of a smaller instrument, so I wanted to do something interesting, but I didn't have enough room to necessarily have all of the bits. So I absolutely utilized the dynamics controller filter mode with the varying response as a way to be both all three things: the filter, the envelope, and the VCA. Because it sounds so good, and it's flexible enough with the voltage controlled response that it works. In the upcoming image, I did tweak the response a bit to give it a bit of a wider range, which changes the response curve a touch, but it's still really, really nice. And that's this circuit Nicol's circuit with this is just so brilliant that it gives us the flexibility to use it in interesting ways like that. Yeah, Bruno, we have two smaller instruments, a bigger instrument, another bigger instrument, and then another smaller instrument, then a bigger instrument, all in the works. And that's what I've been doing actually for the past year, I guess. Every day feels like a year, but the actual year, all of the development time has been towards instruments. Haven't really spent any time working on standalone modules. All these little prototypey standalone modules that you see in here that we are doing as standalone sort of small runs, because those are circuits that we wanted to maybe do a deeper prototyping of for the larger instruments. So all of my design time has been focused on the full synthesizer voices rather than focusing on Pittsburgh Modular individual modules. Which is why, before we would come out with a module every month, for years we did that. And now you see hey, here's our new thing for this year, because we're really changing the way we're doing it. And now there's some stuff upcoming, news related to that it'll all sort of make sense. But for now, that's kind of where we are. Smaller is more affordable is a good idea. We will do our best at both of those. Yeah, I really want to make instruments for everybody, not just people that are super into eurorack, but I want to make synthesizers that, sort of everyone could be interested in. Now, obviously, not everyone's going to be interested in every instrument I make, but I enjoy the design process, and I enjoy designing to different types of people. So this past year has been interesting because it's when you're starting a project, the idea is always sort of who's your guy, who's the artist that you're designing for, what type of artist is this? And you say, okay, well, let's create then a set of tools that I believe this type of artist would be able to utilize, and you kind of go from there. So the instruments I've been working on this year are all very different from each other, but they all have the sort of same philosophy behind them of let's give analog, let's make it modern analog, today's analog, and not just, hey, here's the same 7 bits people have been using for the last 50 years. I just put a different panel behind them, and now it's a synthesizer that probably sounds like everyone else's. That doesn't really interest me as much. So what we're trying to do is say, okay, here's new circuitry that we've spent our time developing. Our engineer, Michael Johnson, is unbelievably good at realizing these ideas that I have and creating these circuits that do really magical things, like the dynamics controller module. The circuitry behind that is it's sort of this magical little thing that Michael came up with that just, it sounds so good, and it sounds like nothing else. And that's why the Voltage Lab doesn't sound like another instrument. You can't really compare it to another instrument because it has such its own unique sound. So it's those bits that we're really focusing on. What are the parts that are unique to us, and how can we expand on that? That's what we've been working on for the past 12 months, ever since the Voltage Lab sort of passed prototyping, and we've started working on what's the next generation going to be. Those are the types of things we've focused on. How can we expand the sound? I think Local Florist is a good example of this as well, where it's taking something that people do know and understand, a flanger chorus, but then redesigning the circuitry in a way that gives us a different type of control than we've ever had before, and a way to utilize that circuit that's never been done before. So you're taking these old ideas, but you're making them new and you're making them modern by recreating them completely differently. And so you end up with something that is, although you could say it's tied to these designs of old, but it's really standing on their shoulders. It's moving, taking them to the next step. It's not a clone. It's more of the next generation. I'm trying to think of non-dumb ways to say these, but it's kind of, that explains it. All right, this top row, I've got a weird angle. It's hard to do it, but I will persevere. These modules covered in tape are, there's two of them. There's this one, another one I'll have here in a second. These guys are oscillators that I've covered with tape because I don't want you to see the graphics. So I bought a roll of red painter's tape to put a plague X on my front door of the house for Halloween decoration. And I thought, well, I will utilize the painter's tape because hopefully when I take the tape off, it won't leave any marks on the panel. The panels are painted aluminum. They're painted white with blue and black printing. Hopefully I'll be able to do a big reveal of that here in the next month or two. Oh yeah, John, that was at that point I was drawing up the sort of sequel to the double helix. It may have actually even been called Double Helix 2 when I showed you that picture. I can't remember. That module isn't going to be a module in the way that you saw it. It was a great... hold on, I got to move the mic. Sorry about that. The angle on this top row is a little weird to continue to talk on the mic. But yeah, that was a great design study, but ultimately it wasn't going to work as a module. The circuitry was too dense. So when I started to lay out the PCB, there was too much there. I would have had to go to 3 PCBs, and I don't like doing that. So it was scrapped. However, I did spend this week redoing it into something that's not a dual oscillator, but more of a synthesizer based around all of the concepts that I was exploring with that module. The idea of cascading wave shaping, so you have multiple wave shapers cascading to create new and interesting wave shapes. And that's a lot of the research that we've been doing over the last year or two has really been focused on that. The Voltage Lab shows that. The Voltage Lab is a good example of our philosophy on cascading wave shapers. At any point in the primary oscillator section of the voltage lab, the waveform can be going through 6 or 7 different wave shapers at once. And that's what I think gives it a lot of the life that it has. So yeah, that module was interesting, but not going to be a standalone module. But the thing I'm working on now based on it is very cool. Because again, ultimately you have to have... I design stuff like this all the time. You know, you end up drawing either a module or an instrument. You end up drawing it 10 or 12 different ways, trying to really nail down what is the point of this module, what am I trying to do with it, and who is it for? And it isn't until you have a very clear answer to all those questions, I think, do you have a finished idea. And especially with some of the concepts that I was exploring with that module, it was too complicated is what it came down to. Yeah, the new Pittsburgh design stuff is, it's going to be very different, to say the least. I was given the opportunity to design my own knobs from scratch, exactly how I wanted them to be, and own the molds. So what that allows me to do is do the exact knob I want. Now, Pittsburgh's been using the same knobs, the same 3 knobs since we started. And the reason why I use these knobs, I kind of like that 1950s science lab vibe that they gave off. But they don't really work with what I believe Pittsburgh has evolved into, which is sort of modern analog. So because of that, and given the opportunity, I had to design my own knobs. We designed something from scratch that allows me to not only have the 3 exact sizes that I want, but also to do color. And not only color, but per module or per synthesizer, I can have any Pantone color in the knob that I want. I'm not limited to 5 or 6 different colors that, you know, Rogan decides that they wanted to do. I can literally pick a Pantone color and say, make it this, and that's what I will get. So I could do some really interesting color coordination with the graphics and the module and not be limited by, you know, the basic 5 or 6 knob colors out there. So just that alone really opens up a world of design that I've never had access to. So the new Pittsburgh stuff coming out is really going to showcase this. I think we've really stepped up the visual look and feel of the modules. It's night and day compared to even stuff like the Voltage Lab. I think the Voltage Lab is beautiful, but the new stuff, it's like night and day. So, and I'm sure some people won't like it. Some people think it's beautiful, but as a designer, it allows me to be creative in ways that I've never been able to do before. So I can't wait to start showing you guys some of this stuff. Leading up to that, though, we're doing like the local florist is going to have some color in it. And we're going to do these small 4HP modules. They're also going to do some color. And we're really going to sort of celebrate the end of the first period of Pittsburgh Modular with some sort of quirky and creatively fun modules as we transition to sort of Pittsburgh Modular 2.0, maybe. I don't want to sound very .com-y, but we are gonna sort of put an end to one piece and start a second beginning with very different look, very different feel, but the sound will be there. Do we have an LED in the new knobs? We can do LEDs, yes. It's not we're not going to do it in every knob, but we could if we wanted to. We can use instead of using a color, we can use a frosted coating and have an LED under it of any color and do it that way. Absolutely. So, and we are going to do that. We're working on some designs that take advantage of that. I kind of think LEDs and knobs can, if every knob had an LED, it would be wildly obnoxious. But I think for one-offs here and there, it totally works. Oh, this is a great module. This is a handmade prototype of the ADSR. This is sort of the second generation when we switched to SMT. This is a module that either I built or Ross built. This is on one of our down and dirty prototype boards that we could get these. We could order these and have them 2 days later. So a lot of this generation, we were using these that weren't too complicated. They're sort of a pain in the butt when you're soldering because they don't have any solder mask. So all the traces are visible and active. So you have to be very careful when you solder these. You end up with solder bridges everywhere if you're not paying attention. And that's why I said earlier, I love these sort of prototype modules and that's what I end up keeping in my case because each one kind of has a great little story attached to it. And so, sometimes they're not big, long stories, but like that, just the idea that the solder mask drove us crazy. We used those. We ordered a ton of those modules at the time, all like that. And as we were building, we realized immediately, no, we gotta stop doing this. These are a pain in the rear. So we didn't do that for very long. So that lives in a time. But they were fast. The nice thing was if you found a spot on the PCB that you'd screwed up on, you could fix it and have a replacement PCB in just a couple days, and that was nice. And they weren't terribly expensive either, which always helps to have affordable prototyping. Is it possible to have a tablet screen interface module sending CV and gates and other modules? I think that module exists. We don't make one. We don't do any really digital stuff, but someone had to make that module. It is fun coming up with new ideas for the company. It can be stressful sometimes because a lot of times you come up with a lot of ideas and trying to pick the right ones. It can also be frustrating too because you come up with an idea that you think is brilliant and really exciting and you're really excited to do it and have it, and then you workshop it and you explain it to some people and you do some mock-ups and show people and try to get them excited too, and they're like, oh, okay, why is this great? and it deflates you a bit. Or you finish an idea, you finish a project, you have the panel done, and you're like, this is it. And you show it to people, and they're like, oh yeah, I could see how this is a good first draft, but what's the real one gonna look like? It's like, oh, are you kidding me? I just spent a week on this, and it's not done? Oh, but that's okay. Ultimately, the more feedback you get that's constructive, the end results are always better. So you kind of take it and you build on it. Yes, if you're on our mailing list, we will send out a link for the local florist. So you will know about it. And what we'll probably do is send out the link in the morning too, because there's only going to be 100 of them. We'll send out the email in the morning, and then probably in the afternoon or in the evening I'll do a live stream, and announce it sort of more generally. But if you're on the mailing list, you could have, if you want to, you could have already gone to the website and ordered one. I feel like that's fair for the people that have gone out of their way to sign up, that we give you sort of first shot at it. Hopefully everybody, does the stream look okay today? I hope. I'm streaming. I have this new streaming studio set up, as you can see, and I can now stream in 4K to hopefully make it a little clearer. You can see what I'm doing. But has the stream been holding up? Does everything sound okay? Does everything look okay? Hopefully. I have spent a lot of this week kind of building my studio, streaming studio out here. So I have this view, which is a nice view. Got some blinking lights behind me here, which is nice. I've got my camera over here. This will be nice when I'm performing or doing a patch lab. You can see me and the instrument at the same time, I think, which is interesting. And then we have this view, which should be nice and crisp and clear. I know there's some glare issues, but when I was setting up the lights, I didn't have any modules in here, so I wasn't able to fix the lights to work with the modules. So now that the case will be finished, I can go back and work on the lights that are up here and clean that up a bit. But hopefully everything looks okay. Oh, and I do have my analog video synthesis gear set up as well, and you can see it on this screen behind me here. It's running. That's just a little LCD screen that I put into an old iMac case, or a Mac case, I guess. But I have that going there, but I can also switch, as you saw at the very beginning, if you tuned in early, I have that going there, so I'll be able to play around with the analog synthesis stuff as well. And all the nice thing about this is all this stuff is now sort of permanently set up, and I just have to come down and turn it on, which means I can do live streams a lot faster. But before, the way I would have to do it, it would be at least an hour and a half setup, because it was all set up in my dining room. So as the setup got more and more complicated, it would take longer and longer to set up, which means I had less and less time and less opportunities to do it. Because, you have an hour and a half setup time at the beginning, you do the live stream, and my live streams always end up being way longer than I initially thought they would be. And then there's an hour and a half to tear everything back down and clean up the dining room. So now that I have this studio permanently set up, I can just come down here, turn everything on, and go, which is cool. So hopefully I'll be able to do these patch labs now. I'll be able to do them 2-3 times a week. Maybe not, they might not end up being 2 or 3 hours like most of my patch labs end up being. But, if I can come down and do a half hour here, half hour there, and just say, hey, let's make a patch with the double helix, or let's make a patch with the oscillator covered in tape, and just make a real, it doesn't have to be a big complex thing, because I haven't invested 3 hours in setup and teardown. So hopefully we can do a lot more of these, and it'll be fun, but we'll see. Yeah, the weather will not get in the way. I do have a table set up over here, closer towards the door, that once things cool down a little bit, if Herman wants to come and perform with me, he can stand way far away. It probably ends up being about 25 feet, sort of on the other side of my basement. So we may start doing those again in the fall. He had some ideas for doing them in his recording studio, because Herman, his day job is running a recording studio. He is owning a recording studio. So he had some ideas on how we could socially distance perform in his studio, maybe get a little bit better sound, because he has a lot of, first he would be in charge of the mix instead of me. I'm not a professional mixer, he is. And he would have control over the gear a little bit more. So we have some ideas going for it, but the way we did it in my backyard is finished. All right, so I do have a couple more modules to put in here, so I got distracted. Oh, this screwdriver, by the way, I've had this screwdriver now for, 6 years, 5 or 6 years. It's kind of all dirty. But this screwdriver, the story behind this is 1 year at NAMM, 6 years ago, very early on for me, at NAMM, Andreas Schneider and his distribution company, Alex 4, were handing out eurorack screwdrivers. So I grabbed a couple, and I have one at the shop, I have one here at home, and this is the screwdriver I use to add and remove modules. And that's sort of all I use it for, although, being a screwdriver, it can be used for many things, but it's become sort of my favorite tool for that, mostly because of the story behind it, because it's not a particularly great screwdriver. It works really well, but the story behind it is just nice, because those guys are such nice guys. Every time I use it, it puts a smile on my face. It did have an Alex 4 logo on it at some point, but that has long since rubbed off. Oh, I can't see. running out of washers. Although this is a plexiglass prototype panel. I don't know why I'm worried about it having washers. But with the other modules, I like to use washers just to keep the panels nice. A lot of the modules I have, you know, I only have the one, or I only have a couple of them, and you know, with no chance of ever having another. So I like to keep the panels as nice as I can. But these plastic acrylic panels that I use for prototyping, they're just clear panels that I print out a piece of paper and put the paper right under the panel for the graphics, which works really well. I cut the panels. I have a little Carvey. It's a little kind of desktop CNC machine. It's the most fun toy I have. It's super good. But yes, but these I don't really care about, but I still use washers for some reason. This one, you can see I tightened this screw down a while back a little too tough, and it's got I cracked the panel. Acrylic is not a good material for eurorack panels, but for prototyping it's great. For a while I would use the acrylic, but I was just using, you know, white acrylic or black acrylic, and it worked, but I kept forgetting what all the jacks and UI was. Most of my struggle here is based on the angle that I'm trying to do this at. It's sort of really awkward. Oh well. John, you definitely want an oscillator covered in tape. Or you certainly want the oscillator under that tape. If you want an oscillator actually covered in tape, then you can do that on your own. You can cover any oscillator in tape. It can be any oscillator you want. Yeah, I talked about that oscillator quite a bit in the last patch lab, and I'm sure I'll talk about it ad nauseum in the future, because it's a fun little guy. I guess the screwdriver is magnetic, so it's got every feature you need. Oh, Bruno, we met at the first Super Booth? Nice, that one was fun. That building was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Such a perfect space for that. Though the new spot's been pretty nice too. I've certainly had my share of fun there, that's for sure. Super Booth, I'm really crushed that I missed it this past year. Although, you know, things could be what they are, I understand, but Super Booth is the 1 week a year that I really, really enjoy getting together with my fellow synth nerds and friends that I see. Maybe that's the only time of the year that I see them. I don't really sleep during Super Booth. I kind of just keep going until the end when I collapse. But the times between, I think, from the time the booth closes and then you end up, you know, you end up going out to the bars or the clubs, it just, the conversations are magical. It's a lot of fun. I don't think I will get to go this year either, but there's always next year. Yeah, covering your case in tape is really the new cool thing to do. I think all the cool people are doing it, and it really shows that you know what's going on. The red tape's a little ridiculous, but like I said, it's the tape that I had because I used it as a Halloween decoration on my house. I put a Black Plague X on my door, and I wanted it to look like red paint, but I didn't want it to be permanent, so the red tape was perfect. It's painter's tape, so hopefully it'll come off without leaving any marks, but I don't know. I have the wrong screws now. I don't know. I have two, at my house I have two big bags of screws. One of the bags is 440s and one of them is M3. I think I grabbed the wrong giant bag of screws. That's okay. This always takes so much longer than I feel like it should take. It's so tedious. Yeah, Clay, the low-finess of the cascading delay network repeats, they do drift around a bit, and as the repeats get longer, that drifting, because the chips, the delay chips aren't 100% stable, as the repeats shift through them time and time again, the pitch does end up slowly drifting over time. And sometimes it's more pronounced than others, but that just comes down to the design of the PT2399 in it and the way that we utilized it. It's just one of the infinite number of quirks about that module. I could write an entire book and just call it The Strange World of the Cascading Delay Network. I think I got all my screws in. I think I do. Let's see. Everything powers on. No weird smells. I think we did it. And it only took 2 hours. So I guess that's about what I thought it would take. I didn't run the wires, so I can't make any sounds with it yet, but it works. Alright, so thanks for joining me as I build my Structure 420 here. I think what I'm probably going to do is come back later tonight and actually do a patch lab with it, because now I'm all set up and I can work with it here. This stream was two purposes for this stream, really. One was obviously to build the system and to chat with you guys, but it was the second reason was to test the 4K streaming and test the new camera setup, test the lighting. Obviously, I have some work to do on the lighting for the system here, the overhead lights. But I think overall everything worked kind of as I would expect it to work, which is cool. Everything is functioning. There's no weird fires around me. Yeah, so I'm real happy with it. I've got everything I need here now set up to do live streams and hang out as often as I can. Hey Herman, you've just come in time for the end. So yeah, I think that's it, guys. I'm gonna head off, but I will most likely be back tonight. If you're in America on the East Coast or West Coast, or you want to stay up a little later, I'll probably do another late night patch lab. But until then, thank you guys for hanging out, and I will talk with you all very soon. See you guys.